Hello there, this is David Perlman for Conversations at the WholeNote. Lovely May afternoon.
Spring at last.
My guest for, I think, the third time, or maybe even the fourth here, is Douglas McNabney, our artistic director, or what is the official title,
Yes,
Douglas?
Artistic Director of Toronto Summer Music, yes.
Toronto Summer Music. And whether it's the third or the fourth in this capacity, this is going to be the last.
That's right. And it's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you, David, for welcoming us again into the WholeNote.
Yeah. I think it was the second time you were here, you said to me that you thought 5 years was a good number to do this kind of thing. And this is, in fact, your sixth.
Yes, I took one more year. Things are going so well. I thought this is too much fun. We'll just have to stay for it for another year. But things are going really well. Last year was an exceptionally good year financially in terms of our audience attendance, and we even managed to put about $400,000 into our endowment as well. And I thought this is perhaps an ideal moment to let somebody else take on these challenges. There's a slight irony involved. The fact that I have built this organization into such a going concern that it became almost unmanageable to do this from Montreal, where I live.
Right.
And I always have to explain my day job is actually at the Schulich School of Music, where I'm a professor of chamber music. And I really think the organization needs somebody resident in Toronto, somebody who can be present at all the functions, and somebody who the audience can easily identify and connect with throughout the year, not only during the festival. So this was the moment, and I'm extremely happy that the board has given the mandate to a good friend and colleague of mine, Jonathan Crow, to be the artistic director as of next September.
AD designate this year, is he?
That's correct. Yes.
And he will be doing a concert as well?
He'll be there. Yes, he'll
much
be
of the
there for
time?
2 weeks during the festival this year, giving one concert we're calling Jonathan Crow and Company, and then he'll also be playing with the orchestra, doing the Lark Ascending on Vaughan Williams on August 4th, and then he'll be playing the Beethoven Septet on August 5th. So he'll be very involved, and all of this was arranged in advance. So it's going to be, I think, a marvelous opportunity to make that transition for the public, and certainly for the board and all the organization, to have a transition that's going to be totally seamless in terms of the direction of the festival. I'm very pleased.
So when did you and he start talking about this as a possibility?
Well, it was shortly after I announced. I decided on February 29th to send in my letter, same day that Pierre Trudeau decided to resign. And I didn't go for a long walk.
You wouldn't have had the snow to go for a long walk in, I don't think.
But it did seem like a propitious moment, and not too long after, when we were considering who are the likely candidates. Jonathan and I had a couple of conversations, and he was very interested. I think it's an ideal time for him. It would be interesting to hear from him, of course, what the challenges are that he sees that are so attractive. But from our point of view, he's an ideal person. He's a wonderful chamber musician, extremely well known in the Toronto community, of course. Kind of a golden boy at the moment, very much younger, and a whole new set of contacts in terms of programming for the festival. I think this is very important for our public, to have this constant sense of renewal and different artists and a different perspective on the same kinds of repertoire, but from somebody else who has a different take on things. And The other thing that I'm really pleased about is Jonathan's lifelong commitment to young musicians and nurturing the next generation. And this is a passion that we shared when he was a colleague at McGill. He was a professor at McGill before coming to Toronto to the Symphony. And he's always been involved. Every year he's been part of our academy, the Chamber Music Institute at the academy as well. And I think for many people, the academy is sort of at the heart and soul of Toronto summer music. It's not the same level of public notoriety as the festival, obviously, but for many of the board, for many of the close family of Toronto summer music, the academy activities, nurturing the next generation of performers is central to what we do, and it's unique what we do with our young artists, and certainly unique the circumstances that we allow, because for me, like everything in life, success in any field is built upon experience. And you cannot, people can tell you things, you can read about it in books, and but until you actually get on stage and try it out for yourself, that's the moment of true validation, where you find from within what it is it takes to be communicate on stage, and also all that information that you've been drawing from all those different quarters, deciding which part of those, what part of that information is actually relevant to you as becoming an artist and finding your own voice. So having these occasions to actually perform, and in downtown Toronto, in a very significant public forum, we're offering a spotlight position for young artists to gain experience through the opportunities to perform in the festival. And Jonathan shares the same passion, and there will be, so as far as I'm concerned, a sense of continuity for the Academy and the festival, that the public will just sort of see this, as I said a little earlier, a seamless transition from one artistic director to the next, and I'm sure Jonathan will do great things over the next 5 years as well.
5 as well.
We better double check that. I believe he's also signed
that's
a 5-year.
interesting.
I would hope
great.
so. Yes,
That's
I'm
great.
not sure
Continuity
exactly.
is a good thing.
Yes.
How far out do you? How much is he going to be inheriting in the way of people who've already agreed to come? 1 year, 2 years out? How many years out have you got commitments for?
There are several invitations that are out, and sometimes those invitations are fixed at some point in the future, and sometimes they're flexible into 2017, 2018, that sort of thing. So a lot of those invitations have, of course, been sent, but Jonathan will have full reign to decide the programming in 2017. There's very little in terms of advanced booking. It's an interesting phenomenon, because it's a very different cycle for summer festivals as opposed to regular seasons. And when I'm booking an artist, for instance, if you want to book somebody, they already know their tour dates for 2017, 2018. They all know where they're going to be in such and such a period, and you try and fit in a date, and it's going to be possible. Somebody coming from Europe, for instance. And or the opera. The opera can go 4 or 5 years in advance in terms of booking their singers, and there's certainly the symphony goes years in advance to book their soloists. But that same artist that will commit to an appearance in May of 2018 will still be, for the summer of 2017, will still be saying, I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to be at that point. I'd have to check my summer vacation, and maybe this festival I'll be going. I'm not sure where I'm going to be exactly. We'll have to talk in the fall. So it's a very, it's sometimes nail-biting kind of experience.
To know about it.
You never know exactly who you're able to be put in place. But as I say, it's a very different cycle for planning for 2016 than it is for the season of 16-17.
Right. So conversely, do you have a situation where people suddenly become available because their summer itself is a bit of an improvisation?
Very much so.
Anyone like that this year who?
Well, I would say one of our last minute, and this is somebody I have been after for a long time, and I'm only finally convinced to come this year, is Jamie Barton.
Right.
And as it turned out, she was going to be at Glimmerglass, and she had a
okay.
small opening,
Right.
depending on what the schedule was going to be like. And then we find out that the schedule for this summer does actually have 4 days off, and we're able to bring her up here for
And
her
when
recital.
And when she comes for a recital like that, your theme be damned, she's bringing the repertoire that she's working on this particular summer.
That's correct.
That's the way it
And
works, right?
That's the way it works, and
Yeah.
we're fine with that. I mean,
Sure.
the festival theme is really it's a thread that we try and connect as many elements as possible. But of course,
Yeah.
when you're even if you're booking years in advance,
Yeah.
the violinist or the pianist will have in their repertoire a certain number of concertos that they're performing that season. You may have a choice, but if it's not exactly what you're looking for, well, then you have to take their choice.
Well, I noticed your title for this year's Handsome Union Jack, for anyone who hasn't seen it so far, fairly carefully, I think, London calling music in Great Britain, not necessarily of.
Yes, you're very good, very observant. Music in Great Britain. And the idea is that we'll be doing of course, a lot of great English music by the composers. We even have some Baroque. We have some Purcell, and we'll have Thomas Arne, and but we'll have, of course, Vaughan Williams and Elgar and Bax and Britten and Bliss and all those other B composers. And but one of the things that we're celebrating, aside from the great English composers, is we're celebrating musical life in London through the centuries. And London, we don't often recognize the traditions of concert going as we know them nowadays. Like playing in large halls that are dedicated to concert music is a relatively recent phenomenon.
Right.
And this was all developed really in London of the 18th century. And the 17th century. And there were, because music was always either in the court or the aristocracy or in the churches. And only in England, with that large, London has always been the largest city in Europe, twice the size of Paris, 3 times the size of Vienna, with a growing middle class that had considerably more leisure time. And then there were these occasions where there's one in particular, John Bannister, who was sort of a disappointed court musician, decided to do his music but sell tickets for them in public. This was in 1672. It's the first recorded public concert with tickets that were advertised in the London Gazette of 1672. So we're celebrating the fact that London has always been the center it's been a mecca for music and musicians.
Right.
Haydn, Handel moved there, became a naturalized English citizen. Grieg, Mendelssohn was Queen Victoria's favorite composer. They all had substantial sojourns in London. So we're also playing the music of the composers who lived in London and spent a considerable time in London. And I'll give you another good example. The Dover Quartet, one of the most remarkable young quartets.
I was going to ask you about the American quartet called the Dover Quartet, playing a Beethoven program, but
How
with
does
a
that
very
relate?
significant music in London
Yes.
aspect to it, the Beethoven Quartet Society.
That's correct. And this was, it's actually a remarkable story. Thomas Alsager in 1845, presented the complete cycle of Beethoven string quartets. This is the first recorded example we have of a Beethoven cycle. He did it in 6 concerts of May and June in 1845. That's just 18 years after Beethoven passed away.
It's extraordinary.
And he had a way of presenting it. There was one early, one middle, and one late quartet on every one of those 6 concerts over the months of May and June. And sort of paying homage to this occasion and to the first time the Beethoven cycle was presented, we have the Dover Quartet playing one early,
Yeah.
one middle, and one late quartet. Opus 18, number 4, 59, number 3, and Opus 132. I mean, a program
Will
to
they do
die
that?
for.
Will they do them
Yes.
in that order, do you
Yes,
think?
yes, they will. We'll be
Ah.
finishing with Opus 132.
I'd have finished with,
59.3.
the 59
Yes,
3.
well, that was the question, but we decided really to follow that model
Interesting.
from 1845. So it's another way of presenting musical life in London. So that's why music in Great Britain
Right.
and all the various traditions and composers who were active in London through the centuries.
Now you may know this already, but in I think 1976 in Toronto, the Amadeus Quartet
One of my favorite
did
quartets.
the full cycle in 6 concerts over a 2-week period at what is now Music Toronto. And they followed the same model always of an early, a middle, and a late. You have to beef up the middles with a few slightly
There's only
past the
5 of them.
middles.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, there's only
But-
5. Yes, yes.
But nevertheless, they followed the same model.
Right.
And the Dover have done the cycle in that fashion elsewhere, have they? Or you don't
No,
know
actually,
that they
no,
have?
this is
they
the first
haven't, yeah.
time. And we did have a significant going back and forth because they are playing the Beethoven cycle. They're doing it this year.
Okay.
And we did have a few, what they suggested. And I said, well, you know, what if we did this and this and this? And they came back with another answer. I said, well, I'll tell you the idea. And I gave them the reference and I told them, have a look at this with the
Yeah.
idea. And so we'd like to reproduce this. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future they now adopt this approach. Thomas Alsager in 1845
It's amazing.
putting this cycle together. It's a wonderful way of looking at it. And
It is.
yeah.
I attended that
the Amadeus,
series back in
a lucky man.
'76.
A lucky man you are, yes.
A very lucky man.
One of my favorite
And,
violinists, Norbert Bremen, remarkable musician.
And not a bad viola player either in
Yes.
the bunch. So the Beethoven Quartet Society is one of the homage venues?
Yes.
Or what?
Yes.
How are you doing that?
Well, it's again, it's very loosely constructed, but another one where the popular concerts was another venue in I've forgotten the name of the hall, one of the most famous halls. Oh my goodness, we better have a look here.
Have a look in the cheat sheet.
Yes, Hanover Square, of course, Hanover Square Gardens, the hall. And this is one of the venues that was really privileged by Johann Salomon. And Salomon was this great German violinist who settled in London. And he was the man responsible for bringing Joseph Haydn to London for both visits. And Haydn, of course, was a superstar in London. It's hard to imagine a composer of classical music now being treated the way Haydn had been treated, as such a celebrity back in the 18th century in London. But so the program we're presenting on that night would be the Haydn Symphony number 102, one of the London symphonies. It's for flute, string quartet, double bass, and piano. And this is an actual arrangement by Salomon of this Haydn Symphony, and it would have been performed also in these concerts. But the other thing on the program, which is really a lot of fun, it's the first performance in London of the Beethoven Septet by Salomon in 1801, and he performed it from manuscript parts. So as a homage to the Hanover Square concerts and Johann Salomon, we're presenting a concert of a Haydn London trio,
Right.
one of the flute trios, then the London Symphony number 102 in a transcription by Salomon, and then the Beethoven Septet. So again, we're having a wonderful program of music, again, a homage to musical life in
Right.
London in the 18th century.
With strategic combinations of instruments, which I'm sure defines your choices of repertoire in a significant way.
Yes.
I've always had this theory that we have all these Bach pieces created as he sort of went from community to community for these extraordinary combinations and unusual combinations of instruments. can't help thinking that the great virtue, the art of making an art of necessity of, the saxophone player's broken his leg. I don't mean a sax player, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Oh, so
Well,
in fact, these are the instruments we have.
These are the
So
instruments
this is what we will do.
It's true. And composers having to make do with the forces at hand, of course, was a
that's
true
a good way of
reality
putting it.
way back. And actually, that is the story that is at the very heart of Haydn becoming sort of the father of string quartets. There were no real string quartets written. There's a few works by Sammartini and that sort of thing, but it really does come out of a concerto grosso kind of arrangement. But a true string quartet with a free bass and two sopranos, it had to do with a particular evening where he was invited, and the forces at hand were two violins, he played viola, and a cellist. It was the sort of the estate manager. And that's what it was.
Great.
And so he was asked to write music for that occasion. And those are the Opus 1 quartets. And you can imagine, especially if you played Opus 1, that music was so successful that they said, you have to write more.
Right.
And from that, of course, then he finished Opus 9 and Opus 17, and then those quartets became immediately successful. They sold like hotcakes, and that's like the beginning of music publication, is also the Haydn string quartets. Amateur musicians were buying them across Europe, especially in London.
Right.
The founding of the music publishing business was in London. Haydn's quartets were published in London and in Amsterdam before they were published in Vienna, where he wrote them. And so there you go. Forces at hand result sometimes in very happy combinations and works that get perpetuated, and a style, a genre gets invented.
Yeah, that's a lovely story. So is the schoolmaster always the violist, like the artistic director? Or is it?
It is interesting, the number of composers that played viola. Haydn, Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, Dvorak, Mendelssohn, they all played viola, and you can imagine there was even an evening where the Mozart played his quartets dedicated to Haydn, and Haydn had his quartets dedicated to Mozart. Dittersdorf was on cello, and Haydn was there, and I've forgotten the two violinists, but you can imagine that Haydn and Mozart were probably fighting over who would get to play the viola at that evening. And
can you see it in the music? Can you hear it? Can you
as
hear
a
it
violist,
in the music?
I don't think I'm imagining it. I do. And there's a way of listening that goes on in an inner voice. I think it's the same probably for a second violin, but there's a way of listening on the inside of a quartet that's immensely satisfying. And when you play chamber music, it's the ultimate musical democracy. There's nobody really leading, and there's nobody following. In actual fact, that's often a problem in a string quartet.
Tell that to Norbert Brainen, as we were saying.
But because if you're following, you're behind.
Yeah.
In actual fact, everybody has to lead equally. And this role of the violist, I enjoy it so much because that act of leading is very subtle. Sometimes there's a way of coloring the phrase or the rhythm, doing something agogically that will suggest a possibility to the person playing the melody. Maybe something that hadn't occurred to them. And then the whole group will take a little bit of time or go to a different color or dynamic. And it can come from the inside. The suggestion of where the group goes can happen from any voice that way. It's a very interesting dynamic.
But with the viola as a kind of fulcrum in a certain sense.
Yes, and also
sometimes.
the bridge between the melody and the harmony. It's really, a viola adds the color to the group in an orchestra and certainly in chamber music as well.
Same kind of leadership for a festival like this?
I've always told my board that viola players are the ultimate team players. Right? So I have to work with the board, I have to work with my executive director, who I adore, Natasha. She does a great job. We have a wonderful person in development, Eli, and so we really are a team. So I think having a a violist in that sort of whole mix can means that the whole thing's working. Not that it can't be led also by a first violin.
Especially one who's a concertmaster.
Of Toronto Symphony.
In the larger picture,
Yes.
he has to do the same thing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I took my what's becoming an, if one can call something that's happening for the second time, annual. I made my little annual pilgrimage to the Bethlehem Bach Festival last weekend.
Wonderful.
And Dan Taylor was there.
Great.
He's been there back many years. And I noticed, there's a segue here. I noticed that he's doing one of the concerts with his
The Theatre of Early Music.
Theatre of Early Music.
Yes. I'm really, Dan is a very good friend for years back in Montreal. And I'm thrilled that we finally have occasion to bring in some early music as well, because we've always centered on music of a particular time or place or city, that sort of thing. Now, our theme this year, for the first time, is looking at music in Great Britain through the centuries. And it's the first time that we've really had an occasion to invite some early music. So I'm just thrilled that Dan's coming with the Theatre of Early Music to do a program that sort of recreates the coronation of George II.
The granddaddy of the Mad King, or the daddy of the Mad King.
Yes, that's right.
I can't remember which, but so that's a coronation-themed.
Yes. Yes. A
Program
lot of
that
the music
he's
was actually
doing.
performed at the coronation, but of course a lot of repertoire around that as well.
So the right-sized hall for something like that is probably Walter. And
Yes.
you're going back and forth
Yes.
between Kerner and Walter
That's
Hall
correct.
mostly.
Yes, we always since I've joined, we've really sort of expanded our offerings in Kerner, which is a magnificent facility. And when we have the repertoire and sort of because it's a much larger hall, when we have sort of the capacity to sell 1,200 tickets, then we'll put it in Kerner Hall. So depending on repertoire, artist, and what we feel, how many people were going to be interested in the concert, we put it in Kerner. Otherwise, we have a concert in Walter Hall, which is a wonderful, wonderful chamber music hall. I think it is one of the best halls in the city, acoustically and visually as well. Very intimate hall connection to the artist. So Dan will be in Walter Hall. One of the things that we're doing this year, I'm really thrilled about, is we're welcoming back opera, and it's something that I had promised myself to bring back, because when I was first hired, it was the board of directors had taken the decision that opera is, of course, extremely demanding in terms of resources, both human and financial, to work, and to try and do opera and anything else is almost impossible. You have to do just opera if you want to make it work well, like Glimmerglass. That's all they do, or Santa Fe opera. To do opera and anything else is almost unimaginable. It's certainly unworkable for a small beginning festival that way. So the board of directors said no more opera. And I have always agreed that we should be centering on chamber music and the vocal arts, but it's sort of in our genes that there is a little bit of opera attached to what we do. And I've always said that we cannot be in the business of producing opera, but we can present. So if somebody else is producing a production, we can bring it and present it in Toronto, where it's just sort of a turnkey production, where we just have to see that we sell the tickets and rent the hall. And I bring this up.
You edged in that direction with last year's festival at the.
That's right.
The other Isabel Bader,
Yes.
as we'll call it from here on, I think.
We did a musical, just in homage. How could we talk about music in America and not talk about a musical? And it was, you're quite right, a first idea of going towards opera. And this year, the opera production, I think it's really the way of the future in terms of these co-productions. It's Against the Grain Theatre, marvelous
so
company with Joel
Ivany and Topher Rashevsky.
That's right, who's going to be conducting. And Banff is also co-producing, so they're doing the production in Banff. The COC is has also been cooperating and helping them find singers and put everything together. And so the production is in Banff, and I thought, now this is a perfect occasion. Somebody else is doing the production, mounting the production, but what we can offer is to have a performance for those young singers in a major urban center in Toronto. And this is what they need. They need, as I said a little earlier, they need occasions to perform. So we're bringing that production to Toronto for one performance in the Winter Garden Theatre,
Right.
which I am just thrilled to see that we are going to use. It's a theatre that I love. I can't believe it's not used more often. It's a very beautiful
Upstairs from
yes,
the Elgin.
Yes.
So there's an operatic beaten track to that building because of Opera Atelier's
That's
home
quite
base.
right. But now we're taking it up to the 7th floor.
Yeah.
And I think this should be a great occasion for the young singers, certainly for Against the Grain Theatre to have this production presented in Toronto, and for us as well. It's a perfect win-win situation, I think, for all of us.
And the orchestral players?
Many of them will be players of the Banff production.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
have to augment it with some players from Toronto. It's 13 musicians. It's a chamber opera, so it's very. It's not too onerous.
So this is Britain's Rape of Lucrece,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Which is getting its share of exposure these days.
Yes, it was presented my opera, I think, just a couple of weeks ago, and it's a very important work. It's the first chamber opera that Britain wrote, and I think this is probably the way of the future for many opera organizations, just to center on a work with fewer singers and smaller orchestral forces, and it's a way forward, I think, for presenting opera. And it's a fascinating work. Some magnificent writing for the voice from Benjamin. Of course, the subject is always topical, and sexual violence. That's that's issues from time immemorial, and this is another look at those issues, and loosely based on historical fact. And then there's also this other aspect that I find really intriguing, and because the opera, the story is told by the main characters, and then there's a solo voice, a solo woman and man, the male chorus and the female chorus, who act sort of as a Greek chorus in some ways, but in a moralizing tone, relate some of the action and with commentary, and that commentary has a very Christian kind of moralizing tone to it. So it's another layer to this ancient story with a moralizing Christian tone being told on top of it. I think it makes it very interesting and provocative, the whole idea.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with it, especially with the ending, because it's a little indigestible, perhaps,
It can be. Yes.
from some perspectives.
Well, I have enormous confidence in Joel Ivany. I think he's a wonderful young director, and as I say, I think it's the way of the future that all our organizations can cooperate and pool our resources in order to make the good opportunities for these young singers.
So you were talking earlier about the arrangement of the Haydn Symphony for the chamber forces. Was Rape of Lucrece a similar thing for Britain? Was it an Albury connection, to coin a phrase?
It was, but
was
it was originally intended. I don't know all the circumstances, but he did intend it to be written for 8 singers and 13 instrumentalists. Now, whether that was imposed on him, budget-wise, or size of the theatre,
circumstantial,
or circumstance, I'm not exactly sure. I should know what the circumstances are, but I know it's his first chamber opera, and probably the first chamber opera as such. And we're now talking about a whole tradition that has been born of that one occasion, that one opera. Now it's so successful that everybody says, okay, we can do something of tremendous dramatic intensity and total musical satisfaction with reduced forces. So
connection.
Why not? And
Yeah.
I think in this world where so much of our relations are virtual, and we have thousands of friends on Facebook, but how many do we really get to spend an evening with and share a glass of wine and look into their eyes and have this sort of connection, a very human sense of communication? I think that's why people enjoy chamber music. Even if they know nothing about classical music, they can certainly appreciate the intensity of that communication that happens by watching young artists who are exceedingly dedicated, committed to what they do, playing great music, and even if they don't understand the music itself, the experience is really touches them. And I think
Because you're watching people who are observably in conversation with each
Yes.
other, which is essential to the
yes,
music.
and the conversation involves the public in a much better way than if you're sitting in a large symphony hall where you're looking sort of at a more or less anonymous group of musicians. You see a few principal players here and there, but it's hard, and there's certainly no connection on an individual basis. It's like another. There's of course other aspects to it.
Sure.
There's the aspect when you
But
go
it
to a
is-
live concert.
But it
It's
is
not
a
the same.
mediated
Yeah.
experience
It's
in
not
a
the
way
same.
that chamber music is not.
Yes.
So what are you doing for that kind of intimate edge at Toronto Summer Music this year?
Well, we, generally speaking, we're a chamber music festival, so it's sort of
Sure.
founded on that premise. But when we have string quartets and all these wonderful artists like Martin Beaver, Johannes Moser, Stefan Lemlin, Stephen Dan, and all these great artists, of course, Jonathan and Eric Nowlin, and when they're together and sharing that music making, they come together for this week of very intense rehearsal and sharing that with the young artists in the academy. There's a real energy, I think, that the audience, it's very palpable for the audience to get involved in that. And one of the other things we do, we have our afternoon activities. We call them
Right.
insider events. So there's lectures, films, and master classes, other opportunities then for the public. It's not like just buy your ticket, go to a concert, go home. They can actually get involved in many ways in a festival experience.
So with the insider stuff, especially with master classes, that's not all written down and put in a book, because in terms of the real teaching relationship that's happening, you can't impose on teacher and student that they must reach a certain point in order to go public
Yes.
necessarily.
That's
So
correct.
how do people get involved in that? How do people get on the inside
Well,
for the insider
We
stuff?
do have public master classes. So
Okay.
we do have, we don't want to interrupt that sort of master-apprentice relationship and
Right.
somehow subject it either to grandstanding on the part of the master or somehow that the apprentice is so concerned about performing that they're
not learning.
that they're not really learning, and
Yeah.
they refuse to make themselves vulnerable, in the sense they have to when they really want to
Yeah.
learn something. So we don't want to interrupt that, but at the same time, we recognize that performing is also part of the process. So, for the public then to witness this process is also very important. So we do have these public master classes. These
Right.
are the few occasions where we say we invite the public in to witness this process,
Right.
and everybody's comfortable with the balance we have at the moment. So
Okay.
there's usually one public master class per week in different instruments.
Okay. No separate student concert series this year?
Well, we've tried to get
I know
away.
you've done it in different ways and
we've-
experimented with it. It's
and
not an easy thing to do.
No, and the sort of because we're dealing with true emerging artists. They're at the cusp, and many of them are already professionals, and
Right.
they're but they're coming back for this, essentially for a moment of resourcing. That's French. Sorry, ressourcer. Of enrichment and wanting to go back and hear more. They want to challenge themselves, so they go back into that mode more of being a student. But they're not really students, and so we wanted to get away from this idea that these are sort of student or academy concerts. So this is why, and especially when we're talking about the Chamber Music Institute,
Yeah.
they're actually performing with
the
their
mentors.
And so this is the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting experience performing the work, but they're also performing with somebody who's done it dozens of times. I mean, it's a double opportunity for them to really learn what it's about to be part of this profession.
I remember you on another occasion talking about how for the mentor who has sometimes done it hundreds if not thousands of times, there's this other experience of revisiting the innocence and the discovery of their own earlier life with the work.
That's right. Seeing the passion of somebody who's playing it for the first time is also an inspiration. So it is a two-way communication, very much so. And that's why I say these concerts are not student concerts. These are actually occasions where I think some of the most interesting music making happens in the festival. So we have branded them this year. I think it's really quite good. We're calling them regeneration.
Right.
And the play, of course, is that everybody's being regenerated.
Yeah.
Perhaps the master, as we just discussed, is rediscovering the passion of somebody who's doing it for the first time. And of course, it's the new generation who's doing it perhaps for the first time. So we're calling these chamber music regeneration concerts.
Okay.
And the same thing for Art of Song, it's Art of Song regeneration. So I think it's a way of really, more accurately reflecting the nature of these concerts. They are not student concerts. These are full-fledged professional concerts, but given to our emerging artists, giving them the chance to do it in public.
Mm-hmm. It's been a journey over the 6 years.
It's really quite extraordinary. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished, all of us, and it is a team that's done everything together. We've brought this, I think, a long way to notoriety. I think it's become an important fixture now in the Toronto music scene. We certainly are developing partnerships. We had the Toronto Symphony play for us 2 years ago.
Yep.
We're developing partnerships with Banff and the Against the Grain Theatre and the COC. And we've become, I think, a very essential part of the musical landscape in the summer for Toronto. We've built an academy that I think fills a true need in Canada. There's no other place now where young artists can have this golden opportunity to perform on stage in a major festival. So for the public, a large public who knows them, get their names known. And
Is it 100% scholarship?
Yes,
now?
full fellowship.
Because that's a huge transition in the process.
It was from the beginning.
Was it?
From the beginning,
very
I said
beginning.
to make this work, it has to be full fellowship. And to their immense credit, the board saw that. It was very clear that, okay, if we're going to make it at the highest level, if we're talking about professionals, they can't afford to take time out or from earning somewhere else of concerts, or there's financial obstacles for young professionals to do this sort of thing. We didn't want to add another one with making it sort of prohibitively expensive. So we cut down the number of applicants. It's a small cohort, only 28 young artists participate in the festival. So it's possible then for us to really provide a tuition-free experience for these young artists to perform.
And for you next? You talked about being able to concentrate on the day job, but how about musically in terms of your own instrument?
My own performing career.
Are you looking forward to having more time for that?
Oh, absolutely. Playing an instrument and being able to play with the colleagues that I get to play with just this afternoon, for instance, at the Bradshaw Amphitheatre. I feel like I'm one of the most fortunate people alive to play great music with wonderful colleagues, and I want to be able to devote a little more time to that, the time left. And there are other projects that I have in mind, always related to working for emerging musicians, and I feel like I've brought this organization to a really, really nice spot, and bringing in somebody a little bit more younger, now with new ideas.
Easier to spot across the room as well.
Yes,
If you're looking
can't
to
miss him. And from that point of view, I think everything is poised just to take the festival to the next level, and I couldn't be happier to sort of pass this torch along to somebody like Jonathan and say, okay, you run with it now, Jonathan. It's yours. Take it where you want.
Great note to end on. It's been a pleasure to be along for the ride and to watch it grow and morph and change along the way.
Thank you, David, for your support.
Congratulations
and for
to
the
you.
support of the WholeNote over the years. It's been much appreciated and a pleasure. And I have to say, one of the great sort of personal experience for me, one of the great advantages has been the wonderful people that I've been able to meet in Toronto on the board and supporters of the festival. Some really remarkable people, and those are friendships that those are for life. Those connections. It's been a wonderful, wonderful journey.
Maybe we'll see you back as a mentor for some of the fellows at some point.
Who knows? Okay.
And thank you all, those of you who listen to these things. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.